Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. I don't know where you're at. I mean, we got people in Canada, we got people California, Washington State. I don't know, but this is Go Biz Guy, the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. And today we've got an awesome guest, and he's anyway. Let me say this. Okay, today's podcast is brought to you by Pardon Focus Marketing Company. Focus Marketing Company is more than just a marketing agency. They're your partners in success. Believe me, they are. Your goals are their focus, whether you're looking to increase sales, build your brand, or connect with your audience. They've got you covered. They're talented and experienced teams specialize in social media elevation, video production, strategic planning, marketing campaign development, and more. Choose Focus Marketing, where your goals are their focus. Visit them online today at Focus, MCO.com, FocusMCO.com, and let them turn your vision into reality. All righty, here we go. So today, this guy has set the history in motion, and in a lot of ways. And he was the youngest Republican voted in at the West Virginia House of Delegates, and he served 2016 until about November 2021. Man, I don't. We're going to ask you some questions about how that got all started and everything. And so we're going to talk about a little about his career. And so today I would like to introduce to you my friend Joshua Higginbotham. Joshua, thank you.
Yeah, so glad to be on your podcast. Heard a lot of great things, listened to some of them myself, and can't wait to talk about the real world.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, listen, let me ask you something. What's the craziest thing you've seen in the last 48 hours?
That's a very unique question. The craziest thing I've seen in the last 48 hours is probably on the West Virginia Turnpike. Two semis went sliding down a hill going 60 miles an hour, and miraculously, nobody was hurt, and they didn't even crash into each other. So I think that was a miracle in and of itself.
Wow, man, that is a miracle because usually when trucks go off the side, I mean, they don't last.
Yeah,
I mean, they.
yeah, yeah. So that was yesterday in the Beckley, West Virginia area.
Oh, wow. So you were
So
traveling in all this mess, huh?
yeah. I had a concealed carry class that I had to speak at. I cover West Virginia, Kentucky, Ohio, and Virginia for the U.S. Concealed Carry Association. So I get to speak at a lot of different firearms related events.
Yeah, but you know what? I mean, you've got your bachelor's degree from the University of Charleston. My daughter went there. One of my daughters got her master's degree there, and so we have a little bit of tie to the University of Charleston. So it was in history. So how did that pair with your interest in politics?
Yeah, yeah. Well, history, when you learn in history class, all the different countries of the past, you're learning about the politics of those countries. You're learning about their culture. You're learning about their military. You're learning about their economies. And it all ties in to what's going on today. Because if you don't learn your past, if you don't learn history, you're doomed to repeat it. And I learned from a very young age that if you're going to go into the political world of any kind, even if you don't run for office, you're just in the political realm, you have to know history in order to affect change today. So, yeah, I was a history and political science double major.
Double major. Okay, that's cool.
Hmm.
You know, I I tell you what, maybe we'll just kind of sidebar for a second. I am so
Uh-huh.
messed up and irritated at politics in the U.S. today.
Hmm.
I mean, I think it's I don't pay attention to it like I used to, and I used to be kind of crazy on Facebook and
Hmm.
because I didn't want I'm a conservative Republican as well, but I didn't want the other side to win. But here's what I think's happening in politics, and we can talk about that. I think we're all becoming like libertarians
Hmm.
in terms of our ideologies and stuff, because there's good, bad, or indifferent in all of them. And
Hmm.
so when you were young, you know, I don't understand, man. How did you make that jump from? Were you going to college when you ran for House of Delegates?
I was, yeah, it was my freshman year. I I actually had decided my senior year of high school to run.
Oh my
I
gosh!
had been,
Wow.
I went and knocked on a lot of doors for John McCain, for Mitt Romney. I was already pretty heavily involved in the local Republican Party. I grew up in Putnam County, West Virginia, so the Putnam County Republicans. And I was first approached by a couple members of the legislature in 2014 about running. And they're
Wow.
like, hey, well, this was right when West Virginia was becoming a Republican state. It
Yeah.
was actually the first election, 84 years. And they said, Joshua, we can't find anybody to run in this district. Would you put your name on the ballot? You're not going to win, but we just literally we just need somebody to put their name on because we can't find anybody. And
That's
I said,
hilarious.
no,
Yeah.
no, no. And I was a senior in high school, and I said no. The person who ended up winning, I wasn't impressed by the work he did, so I ran against him in 2016. And so I guess it was my sophomore year was when I won the election. But yeah, I'd started my freshman year.
Wow. So I mean, you're in college, you're studying history and poli sci, and then all of a sudden, man, you're in the thick of politics in West Virginia.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
again, the transformation. I don't, see, my dad, the only like intro that I had to politics. My dad in Ventura, California, ran for city councilman, and I was a really
Hmm.
little guy when he ran. And I remember being at Sears and Roebuck. So I'm really dating myself now. And so I was handing out pamphlets. Okay, he had never
Hmm.
run for political office. He came in second.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
and so that was only my intro into politics. But what's amazing to me is legislature, how it operates. And so,
Hmm.
did you have any idea of the operations of legislature from a business perspective, from a not a theological, here I am going, and just an ideology perspective, or tell me the transformation because you're just a
Yeah.
sophomore in that process.
Yeah, yeah. I had a basic understanding. Obviously, I knew how government worked. I
Sure.
understood enough about the Constitution. I knew we had three branches and all that. I didn't understand the day-to-day side. And I think most people, unless you're in the thick of it, you're in the legislature or you're a staffer or a lobbyist, you just don't understand the process. And it took me about a year, a solid year, for me to really understand it. And that's pretty normal,
Okay.
regardless of what someone's age is. If you don't have any elected experience, it's going to take you a solid year to actually wrap your head around the process and to become an effective legislator. Um, that's why most people, they usually run for a local municipal office or county commission or county sheriff, and then they run for the legislature. And that way they have some kind of experience in the government before they run for the legislature. And I didn't. Um, so I was very overwhelmed by the steep learning curve that I had to face. Um, but I had a lot of support. The first thing I did was I found a mentor. I found several mentors, and they took me under their wing. I was the youngest one by quite a bit,
Yeah.
and I tried not to step on anybody's toes and make make waves. I tried doing the right thing and making a difference, but um, really, I was there to learn to become a more effective lawmaker. My first year.
And let me ask you something because this is my perspective, and I just think sometimes it's a good old buddy system in politics.
Hmm.
Is that true or false?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. It absolutely is. You try to run your own race and you try to focus on your issues, but even in the Republican Party, you have different factions. You have the socially conservative faction, you have the moderate business faction, you have the I'll call it the populist faction,
Right,
and
right,
even
right.
then, that's a very loose description. and they look out for each other. They help them in their elections. They help pass each other's bills, and they try to one up each other by as a group they'll vote against the other faction's bills just out of retaliation. Whether it's a good policy or not is irrelevant in their opinion, in their mind. Um, and so, yeah, there's absolutely a buddy system in both parties and in every faction of politics.
So, sometimes I keep on going back to, and you said this is pretty cool. You said you had a mentor, and I think being an entrepreneur, I said, yeah, I think, wow, you probably, if you're thinking about going into business, you ought to have a mentor, right? You ought to have somebody that takes you along the side. I mean, I've consulted several young businesses, and they're young entrepreneurs, and I've taken them by the side, have lunch with them and everything. And I don't know whether they call me their mentor, but they've been very
Mhm.
successful with the information I gave them. And so I think that in politics and in business, and I think in politics, one of the most important things to learn is to focus in on your personal ideology, so
Mhm.
that it becomes clear, with your goals and objectives. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You have to know what your own ideology is before you can try to translate that into policy. And you have to have that deep foundation of what you believe before you can create law. I fundamentally believe that. And you have to know what your purpose is there. And my purpose was the fact that there were so many young people in my generation who were leaving West Virginia,
Okay.
whether it be educational issues, whether it would be economic issues. It's hard to find a good paying job that can support a family in West Virginia. It's just hard. Um, Outside of energy and manufacturing, everything is service sector, right? It's Dollar Generals and WalMarts and McDonald's.
I know, right?
That's a lot of our jobs here,
Well,
and that's difficult.
yeah, and the population is 1.4, I think, in counting. I'm not sure, but there's always been a decrease over the years. I live in
Hmm.
Kentucky, and one of the nice things about Kentucky, but I mean, we're growing by leaps and bounds, even on the eastern side of Kentucky. I live in Ashland, and
Yeah.
things are hopping. I don't. I've always been a. I've lived in West Virginia for a long time. I raised my kids there, so I have an
Hmm.
ideology. I have an idea of the politics in West Virginia, and I think it's kind of interesting because I have some friends that used to work for Manchin, and he used to be a
Hmm.
Republican. He switched Democrat. Now he's thinking about doing, and he's thinking about getting his own party going politically, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
So what's interesting about politics is that, here's the bubble, and maybe you can correct me on the bubble. I think with a 4-year term or an 8-year term, and maybe I'm talking about the executive branch here, and correct me on the legislative part. But I think what happens in politics is that we have a negative and a positive because of the differences of ideologies, and we put forth a bill. You sponsored the Fairness Act, and then somebody comes alongside and said, "Oh, we got to get rid of this. He's no longer here." Okay, and so
Hmm.
we lose momentum, we
Hmm.
lose traction. Is that correct?
Sure, sure. Yeah, there's always an ebb and flow in politics. Every election in the legislature, every 2 years, you probably have about a 30 to 40% turnover rate in the legislature. So
Wow,
probably it's pretty massive. Most people are lucky to serve one term.
wow,
I got elected to 3 terms,
yes.
and I'm lucky for that, and I'm always grateful, and I made a difference. I felt. But yeah, some things that we do are overturned relatively quickly, and I think we're seeing that at a state and federal level. It's an ebb and flow, and that 40%, a lot of them, you have several of them who've died. You have some who just retire, a lot who don't run for reelection or lose their primary. That's usually what happens. And then this current term in the House of Delegates, out of 100 members, you've had 9 who have resigned in the first year. We're only halfway through their term, right? And those 9 are either running for a higher office like governor,
Right.
or they've been appointed to different positions in the governor's cabinet, or some different administrative role. So they've left to find another job. And so all the things that those 9 legislators are doing could be potentially undone this coming year now that they're gone. So it's a constant struggle.
Yeah. So let's maybe take a look at the federal side or something like that. And so this is, and I don't, and maybe this exists within the state side too, is that we talk about budget things, right? We talk about, and we say, oh, this president, he zeroed it out, and we were balanced. And then the next term, oh my gosh, he messed up, and now we're back in a deficit. Excuse me. I don't see how the balancing with that ebb and flow can be realistic.
Yeah. I'll give you an example. Just paying the interest on our national debt, that interest is going to outweigh all of Social Security and all of our defense budget by the year 2036.
Dang.
Just the interest on our debt, because we're at what, 33 trillion in debt now.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
In a decade, if we continue at the current projection, you're going to be about $50 trillion in debt, and that's just federal. If you add all the state debt and all the local municipal debt, currently you're looking at well over $100 trillion in debt.
Okay, so let me put you on the spot. Let me put you on the spot, man. Okay. So how do you correct that?
Massive entitlement reform, and you have to
wait. Let's back up to entitlement. Share with me your definition of entitlement.
And entitlement's not always the right word, because there's not really a legal definition of that.
I didn't think so.
It's any type of thing that the government gives the people financially. So Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, CHIP, it's federal retirement system, you name it. And it has ballooned so much in recent years. And I don't see any way, and I don't want to do any of these things. Nobody wants to eliminate any benefits or make them a bit more restrictive. But unless you do that, you either have to raise revenue, raise taxes, or close loopholes, or raise things like the retirement age, or make it to where you can invest some of your Social Security into a type of 401k or something of that kind. And I'm just throwing out potential examples of what Republicans have proposed. If you don't do that, then you're just going to be making interest payments, and you're going to have to scrap so many programs because it's already affecting our bond rating as a country.
Well, and that's another thing. I mean, I don't understand sometimes, and I'm not well versed like you are in politics, but what I don't understand is that, okay, we get rid of a House Speaker, and then all of a sudden, we're going to shut down the government, and then the states look at that and they say, oh gosh, we're not going to get paid and everything. So in this tunnel that we have of debt. And why have we gone to China to say, okay, why don't you start investing in us? Why don't we start doing some of that stuff and everything? And then we have this love-hate relationship with China. Why are we doing this in terms of trying to get cash?
It's interesting you bring that up. They have the same problem as us with debt. They also have over $100 trillion worth of debt between their municipal, they don't have states, they have provinces, 23 states or provinces, and then their national debt. They also have about the equivalent amount of debt as us. The
Wow.
difference is they have a declining population. So because of their one child policy, and now
Yeah.
I guess their two child policy, they have an upside down demographic pyramid. So in other words, they're going to have very few workers paying into their social security system, and they're going to have like two retirees for every one worker here soon. So we talk about how we're going to owe China all this money when they're just as deeply in debt as we are. And unlike them, our population is growing because of immigration.
Right.
And so I think it's less about a game of who wins, and it's more about a game of who loses less in the end. That's what it's
Ah.
going to come down to between the U.S. and China when it comes to financials, when it comes to the debt. Um, ask me that question again in 30 years.
I may not be
Let's
around in
see where
30
we are.
years, but my grandfather, he lived till he was about mid 90s, so maybe I'll be there. So, but here's an interesting thing too, is that, and I don't know whether we, so do you think it sets the tone for a one world government and a one world finances?
Um, I think that since the end of the Cold War, we've kind of been living in a unipolar world. The U.S. has been the sole superpower, and the dollar has been the world's reserve currency. Um, I think that may be a possibility in the future, but I think that what we're seeing now with BRICS, so that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and Russia,
Uh-huh.
and now it's several other countries, they're going to try to create their own um, financial system separate from like the World Economic Forum, separate from the dollarization of the world. So I think before anything like a one world currency happens, you're probably going to get half the world using the Chinese currency and then half the world using the dollar. Um, I think that's going to be the next big transition before something like what you're talking about, which may be could be decades away. But yeah,
What about the euro? So that's a
mm-hmm.
collective currency, right?
Uh-huh, yeah, yeah. It
And that's probably a
with
model for so many countries to utilize.
mm-hmm, sure, sure.
Because doesn't
We've
it
got
forgive debt? Doesn't the euro forgive debt and increase revenue by the value of the euro?
possibly, possibly. You also just have to look at how stable the EU is. I mean, it wasn't that long ago Brexit happened. Um,
Right.
there could be other countries looking at leaving the euro. And then you have to lok at that value too. It is so tied in with the dollar. It is so tied in.
Yeah, it
And
is.
if either the euro or the dollar goes down, the other one has an equal reaction.
Yeah.
And it's the same with a lot of these cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin. They're supposed to be, uh, they're supposed to be safe away from the central banks. But if you look at the value, they're they're up and down with the dollar and the euro as well. So
They
that's why I
are.
say
Yeah.
we're still in a unipolar world until China decides to cut ties with us economically, or we decide to cut ties with them.
Well, I thought I read
Yeah.
an article early this morning. By the way, I get up at like 4:30, feed the dogs, and let them go out. And my days are long because they stay up for an hour going in and out playing in the snow. And I have
Uh-huh.
three stooges, is what I call my dogs. But at any rate, so I think early this morning, I was, and you may hear them bark here in a little bit because they like to do
Hmm.
that when I'm podcasting. But I read where inflation, is what at 4%. They're thinking about raising interest rates at least maybe four times in 2024. So that affects the dollar, correct?
Well, sure. Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely does. Um, it's going to have a negative impact on the housing market. It's going to affect everyone's credit card payments. It's going to affect The ability for, if it affects our bond rating, it's going to affect our country and our ability to borrow more money. Um, so yeah, the Fed absolutely it does impact um, our ability to spend money. Yeah.
So when you look at it from a small business perspective, I mean, I'm pro small business and I'm pro this
Mhm.
conversation because I think it's an understanding about how government, federally, locally, statewide, has an effect on entrepreneurs. And it
Mhm.
does have an effect on entrepreneurs, right?
Sure, sure. There's an interesting Wall Street Journal article I'll turn you to and review your listeners to.
Sweet.
It talks about the insolvency of modern day firms. And by firms, they mean any type of company that is reliant on a line of credit. It could be Walmart, it could be Dunder Mifflin Paper Company, any company
Right.
that exists because of the line of credit. And because of the artificially low interest rates of the COVID era,
Yes.
what we're seeing is about 15% of those firms will never be profitable because they've been able to build a company. A lot of times they were started during those low interest loan era times. So they started 2020, 2021, that time frame, and they've been able to grow to the point where they've still never turned a profit. And 15% of them, 15% of these firms will never turn a profit. And I think that's going to be a major bubble in the coming year or two. Um, is looking at how these companies are going to remain solvent with higher interest rates.
Well, and let's go down to a mac or micro business. So for the entrepreneur starting a business, you know, um, cash flow, for instance, Focus MCO, um, got maybe, I don't know, maybe $300,000-400,000 in revenue stream. Okay, young startup that and I think sometimes an entrepreneur forgets about a small business, I guess. They forget about the economy, and
Mm-hmm.
because they're maybe an A type personality, they just move forward, and then they make the
Mm-hmm.
adjustments on the turn to say, "Oh my gosh, okay, here's the deflation of maybe some investments that I'm doing, and I need to regroup." Right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think interest rates affect that. Um, so we're going to see a major reset in the economy because of these higher interest rates. We've seen it the last 2 years.
Yes.
Things have been slowing down, and it takes forever for companies to respond, for the economy as a whole to respond to those interest rates. And so, yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
I think also I think if you look back at COVID, um, I'm not going to get Fauciized with you. I mean,
Yeah.
there's all kinds of conspiracies. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It happened, right?
Hmm.
And so economies shut down, and they have, like you said, they've never been able to reset the button.
Right.
And maybe I don't know. Maybe there's a tax benefit of them showing a loss year to year. But you see a lot
Sure.
of things that reverse on companies because, like Amazon, they send everybody mobile or not mobile,
Hmm.
but what do I want to say to their homes and work. Okay, and
Hmm.
I've worked out of my house for years. And not very many people can
Uh-huh.
do that, to be honest with you. Okay. It takes a
Yeah.
little bit of a
Yeah.
discipline so you don't turn on the TV and watch TV and don't work. So,
Right.
but
Right.
but but I think it's set the model for a new economy and everything because
Hmm.
um look at the restaurant failure. Look at so many
Hmm.
things that have just blowing up in our economy because of COVID.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I think people are walking on the edge because they don't want to go back to a COVID or they don't want to go back to shutting down completely.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I
Yeah, and
think
we absolutely should not shut down again. I mean, I don't think we're going to get to that point. I think society has we've learned collectively that that is far far worse consequence than any virus that we have out there right now. So, and when it comes to economic impacts and the societal impacts, look at New York City right now. They have more than 40 million square feet of empty commercial office space.
how much?
It's 40 million square feet
Well,
of
that's because of the
empty.
mayor. Okay, that's because of the mayor
Yeah, that's true.
and the governor. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I just went there. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, you're right. You're right. And people are leaving those cities in droves. San Francisco, Chicago, New York. They're leaving the big cities and they're going to Florida. They're going to Texas. And
They're
some of
going to
them,
they're
I
going to
hope,
Amarillo too. I mean, not Amarillo, but San Antonio. Okay, that I said it.
they are.
Yeah.
They are. You're right. You're right. And with that and the work from home mentality that so many millions of people have, what you're going to see is a major collapse in the commercial office real estate
Uh
space
huh. Uh huh.
because you are seeing a massive drop in the number of tenants. Companies can't afford to keep paying keep paying for office space that's sitting empty, and there's no point. So I think that's another bubble to look out for as well.
Is it that's a very interesting thought because I guess I didn't look at it in that telescope. But I think you're absolutely right when you take a look at the big picture. And now everybody's at their home. And I tell you what, I've enjoyed working out of my house, man. I tell you, I've worked for
Mm-hmm.
companies where I had to generate $1.5 million in sales. I've had to do consulting. I've had to do all kinds of stuff. But man, I'll tell you what, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And
Yeah.
I think that once people get a hold of this and companies can
Mm-hmm.
see a profit margin because they're not paying. I mean, if I just look at Cross Lanes, West Virginia, and I go up on the hill where Walmart is, okay,
Mm-hmm.
those businesses pay close to 15,000 a month for
Yeah.
rent. That's probably
Mm-hmm.
cheap. Okay. But
Mm-hmm.
when you stop and
Mm-hmm.
think about the kind of revenue you have to do to be in business up there,
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's a lot of ROI. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why if you
Yeah.
look at the interest, I mean, and I know that some restaurants like BW Wings and stuff, they have to have a place. And so I understand branding and all that stuff collectively works together to put that
Mm-hmm.
all, make it happen. But, if you're starting I've seen like, I don't know, I think Anytime Fitness went out up there. I mean, so when
Mm-hmm.
you take a look at that, I mean, if you don't have your motion in terms of
Mm-hmm.
creating revenue for that place, you're going to go broke in the first month.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And most of those businesses, the retail restaurants, they have to have a storefront, right? You have to have a physical location.
Yeah.
But I'll just use the organization I work with, for example.
Okay.
It's Delta Defense. We're the service provider to the USCCA, the U.S. Concealed Carry Association. We have 750 employees nationally. Almost all of us are remote.
Love it.
Before COVID,
Yeah.
and we've grown a lot
Yeah.
since the pandemic. We've probably doubled,
Wow.
which is good. It's very sustainable growth too, which I like. Um, at the time, 400 employees, and most of them were at the office near Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Oh, wow.
And I was up there a few months ago at our headquarters, and there was maybe 100 people in the building working, and it was mostly people working in the warehouse. You had some receptionists, a
Right.
handful of the executives were there, and the other 650 employees remote
Right.
everywhere. So and we're not going back.
No.
It's not going to change.
No. And again, I think, and tell me a little bit about Delta Defense and tell me a little about your current job and
Yeah,
everything. I think that's an interesting. I'm a member, by the way, guys. So just as a
yeah,
sidebar. Okay.
yeah. That's actually how we met. Was at a concealed carry class back
No,
in
no,
the
no.
fall.
I'll tell you what. I watched you on Facebook, man, when you were a House delegate, brother. I watched you,
Yeah,
and I followed you, and I applauded you a lot when you were making statements. So go on.
I appreciate that. Appreciate that. And yeah, so Delta Defense, we're the service provider of the U.S. Concealed Carry Association. USCCA is a membership organization of 800,000 law-abiding gun owners. We make sure members are more mentally, physically, and legally prepared to be involved in a self-defense incident. Most notably, we have an attorney network of 1,400 lawyers across the country who come in and at no expense and no cost to the member can defend them in court if they're involved in a civil or criminal case related to a self-defense incident. So I've seen when I was in government far too many people who lost their homes, lost their savings, lost everything they have just because they had to defend themselves using a firearm, had to protect their own life or their family. And that's why USCCA exists, is to try to help people in situations like that.
Well, I think I shared with you when we met at the training and everything, the concealed training. I do martial arts, and
Mm-hmm.
this almost the same thing applies. If you end up breaking somebody's neck because you're defending your life and everything, I mean, you're going to face some jail time, or you're going to face a court. Okay,
Right,
and so
right.
we're trained not to use martial arts at law, at all. Just like you are a gun,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to use that, but to have the training and the knowledge is powerful. Okay,
Yeah,
and so I just kudos to that organization. I think it's a great organization. I would encourage everybody to. Why don't you give that website or give them your personal information so they can maybe contact
sure.
you.
Yeah, yeah. If anybody wants to get involved as an instructor or become an official partner, gun store, gun range, or you just want to become a member, that way you have that legal protection. You can give me a phone call, 304-881-1864, or you can join or get involved at the usconcealedcarry.com. Just Google USCCA, and it's right at your fingertips.
Yeah. So if you get some calls from South Africa or India, they heard that. Okay. So
Yeah,
I just want to let you
that's
know
fine.
this goes out to over 100,000 people and about 15, 20 foreign countries. So
That's all right.
yeah,
That's
yeah, that's cool.
I
That's
don't.
cool. Yeah. So let's back up a little bit and everything. So let's talk a little bit about your childhood. I mean, I
Right.
don't know about childhood, but where'd you grow up at?
I was born in Charleston, West Virginia. I grew up in a little town outside of Charleston called Poca, West Virginia.
Okay.
Uh, Grew up on a family farm in Poca. When I was a kid, we had about 40 head of cattle.
Wow.
We had chickens, and uh, yeah, it was a nice childhood. You know.
So did you like were these milking cows or were they like you slaughtered them
No,
or
no, we slaughtered them. We Currently we have about 120 longhorns. So
dang,
yeah, we're
really?
not. We do. It's
Up in
a
up
lot
in
of fun.
Polka?
No, so that's our other property. We have a few fields near Point Pleasant, West Virginia, if you know where that is.
Yeah.
So in Mason County, it's yeah, we've got 120 longhorns we slaughter. They taste great, by the way.
I would love
Um,
that. That sounds very good. Longhorn from Texas.
yeah, yeah, it's actually ideal for them in West Virginia too. They thrive here. And we on our farm we also have an event venue, so we have 30 weddings a year. People do their corporate retreats on the farm, hunting retreats,
Oh, I want to know
Christmas
about that
parties.
stuff. I mean, that would be great to attend one of those just to have a steak, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can have a longhorn steak from the very farm that you're eating it at.
That
That's a
sounds
lot of fun.
I mean, does the Department of Tourism know about you guys?
They do.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So we're pretty involved in like the local convention and visitors bureau and the chambers and Yeah, we've
Yeah.
worked with the Department of Tourism to promote it a bit.
They've got to know
So
you. I mean, yeah, you would have.
yeah.
When there was a contract with a company that published the West Virginia State Travel Guide, and so I was part of that
Uh-huh.
marketing team. And
Oh, you're kidding.
so yeah,
Yeah.
you would have been a client of mine for sure. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's
So
a
so
lot of fun.
yeah, so your parents are farmers, right? They started a long time ago, or what?
Just hobby farmers. It's farming, so you don't make a whole lot of money. My dad was a welder for about 20 years before he started his own company. It was a rail service company. So they do a lot of loading and unloading of rail cars, repairs, storage for the rail industry. He was a welder for CSX for most of his career
Okay.
before he started his own company, and semi-retired. And then my mom, she had an antique shop for a long time, and now she has her own little boutique in Poca. Um, and just between those small businesses and the six grandkids that they have, it keeps them pretty busy.
Awesome. I used to live in Poca. I used to live up on by the golf course. I forget the.
Oh, really?
I lived
Forest
on the
Park.
17th hole there, huh?
It's the neighborhood is Forest Park
Yeah, yeah.
now.
I had a house up
Um,
there, and
oh, you're kidding.
and I used to watch them tee off and everything. So the interesting thing,
Mm-hmm.
sidebar about that, it was like I don't know, it was a crazy house. It was like I don't know, 5 bedrooms, 4 levels, and I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked the realtor when we sold it. I said, and we purchased it when the interest rates sucked. Okay, and so the
Mm-hmm.
thing of it is I asked the realtor. I said, listen, I said, if I was to take this property and put it on wheels and move it to my home state of California, what would be the value? And she said about $4.5 million.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
said, can we get those wheels turning? I mean, but anyway, I enjoyed living up there in Forest Park, and it was a great place to live, and enjoyed I didn't golf at that time, but I enjoyed that area, and I enjoyed Poca, so that's pretty cool.
Uh-huh.
So do you have
Yeah.
any future ambitions for politics?
Yeah, so I'm sure I'll run again. I'm 27. I have plenty of time. Most people don't even look at running until they're retired. And I put in a lot of time already myself. So I'm very fortunate in that regard. Right now, I do some lobbying and government relations work. I'm very involved in the community, serve on a few boards of directors, and different nonprofits. I help with a lot of candidates. People can hire me to do their social media and direct mail. Um, I, I can help with a lot. So
Cool.
I'm still at the Capitol, usually 1 or 2 days a week, um, for meetings, and between that and the U.S. Concealed Carry Association and
You're,
teaching different firearms related classes,
you're a busy
I enjoy
guy.
it. But
Yeah.
I am, and I like feeling like I'm making a difference. And even if I'm not in office, I want to be able to make a difference. So
So what are some of the
look
boards
out
that
for
you?
20
Go ahead.
look out for 2028 or 2030. I'll probably probably look at that in a few
Awesome.
years.
So what are some of the boards
So
that you serve on?
I serve on a board for an organization called Prestera.
Oh yeah,
It's
nice,
West
nice
Virginia's.
organization. Right.
Yeah, we have about 60 locations. It's West Virginia's largest mental health
Uh
and
huh.
recovery provider. We especially do a lot of work with mental health for kids in the school system. We have a lot of recovery centers for
Yeah.
recovering drug addicts.
Yeah.
And so I got involved with them when I was in office, helping them. My fire department here in the Charleston area, the Tyler Mountain Fire Department, I'm on their fundraising and event committee.
Cool.
I'm an elder at my church, First
Awesome.
Presbyterian in Charleston.
Good for you.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I stay pretty active.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I do too, and you can imagine I'm going to be a guest on a podcast myself this evening or tomorrow evening, I think. and
Uh-huh.
it's pretty cool. But listen, Joshua, thank you so much. Listeners, I'm telling you what, I mean, this has been a joy to talk politics freely and not I'm not one sided on politics, you know. And I tell everybody, I said, listen, I said, on my podcast, I've talked to Democrats, Republicans, gays, non-gays, Latinos, Chinese, Asians. I mean, it's all over the board, so it doesn't matter. I just think the information is important for small business owners and entrepreneurs to stay focused. And so, one more last thing about focusmco.com. Listen, just give them a shout. Go to their website and explore. They've done some amazing work with some Hollywood actors, and they're very tied to Hollywood and through Georgia, et cetera, et cetera. But there's some really good people. And Joshua, thank you so much for joining us today. And with this in mind, I'm going to have you back on, and I'm going to have to go have a steak at your place. So keep me in tune,
Yeah,
man.
absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, you're more than welcome, and we'll have some events there. You can come, and you can definitely attend. And I look forward to being on your podcast again.
All right.
Really
Listen, take
enjoyed it.
care. Have a blessed day.
You too.
Bye.